Welcome back to another episode of the Commitment Issues Podcast. I'm Woody Womack, joined on the phone, back from Rio, live from Texas, Nick Kruger. Nick, how good does it feel back to be stateside?
As a doctor and a woman, I am very excited.
I didn't have that moment where I got out of the plane and kissed the ground, but I sure was happy to get back into the great state of Texas.
Boy, not only did you come back to the U.S., you got to go straight to Texas. So
that's right, best country in the country.
All right, so we'll tell some stories from Rio later. We're going to jump right into the recruiting news. We've been gone for a while. With you being in Texas, whatnot, we lost our producer. Dave Berry filled in 1 week, but he had enough of Rob Cassidy's audio quality, and he said, forget it. So anyway, we're back. Biggest story of the week this week so far, Michigan losing 3 recruits, all of them 4 stars or higher, 3 guys who had been committed, 2 of them actually from the state of Georgia. Now, Nick, we know you've been off the radar, so I'll talk about this a little bit. One of the guys, Aubrey Solomon, 4-star defensive tackle, had just done an interview with me last week at the Corky Kell Classic, where I was famously there by myself. And he that's an inside joke. He told me, Jim Harbaugh is a celebrity. I love Michigan, this, that, and the third. And then, boom, cut to 5 days later, he decommits. So the story was, he was out there reported that Michigan had sent him a letter thanking him for going to an event he didn't even attend. They spelled his name wrong. They spelled his mom's name wrong. And then I think he kind of used that. I kind of got the attention as what was the biggest story. But you and I both know, you used to live here with me in Atlanta. These kids rarely leave the Southeast to go, especially that far away to Michigan, especially if they have other big-time offers. And I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. A couple other guys they lost were 2018 commits, both 4 stars. And once again, with those guys, if they commit more than a year before signing day, does it really mean a whole lot? So from the outside looking in, what was your take on Michigan's bad week this week?
Well, first and foremost, you can't misspell mom's name, especially for a kid in the Southeast. That's a cardinal sin. You might be able to get away with misspelling his name because, kids got crazy names, but when you mess with mom's name, forget about it. So that was probably the number one misstep. But when you talk about Michigan, I mean, even right now, as it sits with those decommitments, they still have a top 10 recruiting class in our rankings right now. And as we know, Harbaugh is an extremely aggressive recruiter. He was coming down doing the satellite camps. They send out a ton of offers to a ton of kids. Obviously you don't want to lose 4-star commitments if you can't help it, but they've definitely got options on options. And for a guy as proactive as John Harbaugh and his staff, to go out
Jim
there,
Harbaugh.
Jim Harbaugh, yeah, but Harbaugh.
One of those two.
Mike Harbaugh and his staff to go out there and be in communication with kids and be as proactive as he is, and I'm sure that they're not losing a ton of sleep over it.
Well, it's interesting because it gives us a window into what happens at these schools. Jim Harbaugh is not sitting down writing these letters. You know what I mean? He's not the one that misspelled it. Probably some poor intern or whatever in the recruiting office who's now been fired and shamed off of campus. So it's a bummer that was kind of what happened. But like I said, I think he was really looking around. I think Michigan does have plenty of options. We actually have an article up on the site that went up on Thursday, which is the day we're recording this, where we look at some of the other options they have now that things are opened up. In terms of Solomon, I think, you look at schools like Georgia, Alabama, Florida State as kind of the early favorites for him now that he's back on the market. And boy, his mom, he let it be known that his mom is now in the driver's seat of his recruitment. So like you said, you better get that name right if you're going to be one of those schools trying to get back in the mix for him. While you were gone, Nick, we updated the rankings. Actually had 2 rankings meetings while you were in the great country of Brazil. And we have a new number 1 player. You came home to find out that Najee Harris had become the number 1 overall player. What was your reaction? Surprise? I mean, I love Harris as a player, but he overtook Marvin Wilson, a Texas player. So what was your thoughts on that?
No, I wouldn't have disagreed with that at all. I think after we had a chance to see him in person at the 5-Star Challenge in June, he really, I mean, when you take, all you have to do is just take a look at him. And when you talk about a guy that passes the eye test, I mean, what position do you feel outside of a lineman position, could this guy not play if he wanted to? You know, he looks like $1 million. You know, I think he's going to be a really nice weapon for Alabama. They're going to be able to use him in a million different ways if they wanted to. Marvin, on the other hand, you know, I mean, he's still been good. He was good at the opening. He was good at the 5-star challenge, but the consistency when you hold Najee and Marvin side by side, you know, and take a look at each of their performances within their positions and what they were asked to do, I think Najee had the more successful summer, and Marvin is the same story. He's going to be a great pickup for whatever school he ends up going to. And a lot of the things that we had written about him in our reactions to moving him in the rankings hold true. He's got a high motor. He's really strong, you know, and he's a great personality. He's going to be a great fit in whatever locker room that he goes to. But you know, he's still number 2 in the country. I mean, he's still in the conversation, and he plays at a school in Houston where he's going to have an opportunity to make a ton of big plays. You know, going to the private school that he goes to at Episcopal. So I'm sure his film is going to be eye-popping this season, and he's definitely a high motivation guy. So this is going to be something that he's going to look, you know, turn to and be fueled by it rather than sulk about it. So you know, I think Marvin Wilson is still going to have a chance to rebound and come back and contend for that number 1 spot next time around.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great year on the defensive line. I mean, if you compare Marvin to some of the guys we even had last year, even someone like Derek Brown, who I know you were never a big fan of, who ended up going to Auburn. I just don't know if you put Marvin in that class with some of those guys from last year, if he would be the top guy in that group. So, you know, the talent fluctuates from year to year. Marvin did win the MVP at the 5-star challenge, but you know, honestly, that was my call. I mean, we were really scrambling, and he was kind of the guy who won it by default based on the coach's opinion, but even any of them didn't have a definitive, you know, far and away winner like we did with the offensive line.
What's good about Marvin too, though, is every event that we've seen him at, even though he comes into the camp knowing he's the top guy, and he always plays like he has something to prove, and he'll always end up taking a ton of reps. So it's easier to say, like, you know, it's easier to point out the deficiencies sometimes that you see in his game or the inconsistencies because he's taking so many more reps than other kids that we've seen come in with, you know, I don't know, maybe higher opinions of themselves or, you know, expectations. So, you know, but he makes himself a target, but he embraces it. And I truly think that he is a guy that's motivated to stay, you know, at the top of his game whenever possible.
Yeah, he did carry our team to a victory in the lineman challenge when several other not as tough players opted out with injuries. But that's all. We don't want to talk about how their rankings shook out. But we getting back to Najee. It'll be interesting to see if he ends up at Alabama. I think he's a special talent. I know some people have some concerns. Does he love football? Which, you know, I think that's kind of a stupid talking point anyway. How do we know what do you mean, does he love football? You know what I mean? He's awesome. I know that. How can you determine if a kid loves football or not? I got news for you. I did not love football in high school playing it, and now look at me, you know?
Well, whatever school he ends up going to, and you know his future from there on, I mean he's going to love football a lot because he's going to be a superstar if he, you know, continues down the path that he's going. So.
All right, so this past week, a huge news story for Ohio State as they picked up commitments from Trevon Grimes and Tyjon Lindsey, 2 of the top wide receivers in the country. I think 2 of the top 30 overall players in the country. And I think both of them had been expected to go there for a while. But, you know, it's a big deal. I mean, Grimes is a guy that our boss, Mike Farrell, likes to compare favorably to guys like Julio Jones and A.J. Green, which is really saying something. Tyjon Lindsey's a short little, you know, slot receiver type who compares to, in my opinion, somebody like Sam Bruce, although we have him ranked way higher than Sam was for some reason. It's interesting how we have such a debate over Lindsey being a 5-star where I felt like Sam was just as productive. But anyway, the Buckeyes, it's a huge victory. Those are 2 out-of-state guys. Urban Meyer just seems to be picking people now, and a lot of people are talking, can they push for number 1? What's your take? I mean, how do you see these 2 fitting in, and how important was this for them to kind of seal up these 2 huge names?
That's a big win for Ohio State. I mean, they're really. I think my perception of the Ohio State program and their offense really took off this past season when when you move a quarterback to wide receiver and he ends up being a big time NFL draft pick. I think the kids see that and say like, hey, we can have success in this offense. And for two guys like Grimes and Lindsey to come in, those guys are definitely going to be able to contribute. And it's a great 1-2 punch for them. Just talking about those two specifically, you've got Grimes, who's a great perimeter guy on the outside, obviously is very successful running deep routes. You have, can go up and win jump balls. You have Lindsey, who you line up in the slot, like you said, one of the shiftiest guys that we've had a chance to see play in a game sort of atmosphere, and super fast as well. So putting those two guys on the field really gives them options offensively. And then you look at their class as a whole. Just looking at the new rankings release, I'm looking at it right now. When you add Grimes, you go down the list. Josh Myers at number 14, Sean Wade at number 17, Wyatt Davis at number 18. I mean, they're putting a ton of big name guys into this class, all highly ranked guys too. So Ohio State fans really got to be, licking their chops at the prospects of the future.
Yeah, and they're recruiting nationally too. A lot of those guys you mentioned, Josh Myers is a local kid, but California, Florida, Urban getting it done on the road. And I think, I think it's to the point now where we saw it with Emory Jones, we saw it with Benjamin Victor last year. When Urban personally picks up the phone and gets on the phone with the kid, it makes them stop their whole process. It's just an interesting approach that he's taking. I know he talked to Xavier McKinney, who's a former Alabama commit, a top 100 defensive back who, seemed to be down to Clemson, Georgia, a few other options. And then he tells me, I talked to Urban Meyer on the phone tonight. I'm taking an official visit to Ohio State, just like that. So the old call of Urban, is very strong, and he's really recruiting at a high level, and that's, of course, what led to so much success at Florida, and then the early success he had at Ohio State. They're kind of they're to reloading stage, not rebuilding.
You remember that conversation he had with Isaiah Pryor when he committed? How excited Isaiah Pryor was.
Yeah, maybe you could add in some of that. Maybe you could add in some of that audio.
Listening to Urban Meyer's conversation, I mean, he was really trying to stimulate conversation there. Isaiah Pryor must have been a little starstruck or something.
Yeah, maybe maybe he takes different approaches with different types of personalities. would be my guess. While you were gone, we did a couple of commitment videos. That Grimes and Lindsey actually did one of them playing dodgeball, which I guess in production quality, or I would give it high marks. I don't know about. I thought it was kind of corny, but that's me. I'm old man, get off my lawn. But we did some. We did one with 5-star A.J. Terrell, who committed to Clemson. A.J. is a guy that I've been tracking very closely over the past year. He went from being a 3-star wide receiver, where we had him ranked early in the process, to now he's a 5-star cornerback. I think he's the number 11 player in the country. A lot of controversy over his ranking, especially here in the state of Georgia, because we have him ranked a lot higher than other people. But guess what? That's because we actually get south of I-20 in the city and go out and watch people play. Terrell's a really impressive talent. I mean, 6'2". He ran the fastest time in our ill-speed competition in the entire country, an event that was dominated by guys who were 5'8", and then he's out there at 6'2", putting on a show. So it was interesting. We Dave Barry, our other videographer, flew out from San Diego or California, wherever he lives, to meet me in Temecula, and we had the whole family. We took him down to the I Dare You offices with our friend Glenn Ford. We were there till about 1 a.m. trying to film this thing, because he actually played in a game that night. The coach kept him from us from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So by the time we got to the south side of town and did everything, we filmed it at about 1 a.m. And, AJ is a quiet kid, but the video came out well. I think Clemson was really excited, and, Clemson's just killing it as well. We mentioned Ohio State. Clemson's now got one of the top classes in the country. I'm not sure where exactly they are on the team rankings. I think easily top 10. But they have several big names still on the market, and I think they're in a position where Dabo Sweeney and company, they're getting these guys from Atlanta. This is the reason Kirby Smart was brought into Georgia, to maybe close the gap on some of these guys that were getting away. And so far, Clemson hasn't skipped a beat in terms of stealing talent out of Georgia.
Yeah, and when you look at guys like Terrell and Lee Anthony Williams that we saw commit earlier, that's a good 1-2 punch out of the Atlanta area for the secondary for Clemson. And they're going to get work with the offense that they have out there. People trying to keep up with them points wise, but I think when I was out before I departed and moved over here to Texas, and I went out to go see. When I shot Lee Anthony's commitment announcement video, actually, part of that was when he was training with a friend of the podcast, Cam Newton, with his 7-on team, and both him and Terrell were out there at the same time. So, I'm sure there's some relationship there that they were, having some discussions. Terrell's a big kid too. He's gonna bring. I can't believe I'm looking. We have him listed at 6'2", 170. I can't believe he's that light. I feel like he's. My memory serves like he's much bigger than that. Probably a guy that you can work around in a couple different positions in the secondary. And Clemson's defense has really been, reputation wise, has been matching its offense here the past couple of seasons. So Clemson fans got to be real excited with the haul that they're getting out of your neck of the woods.
Yeah, and he'll help fill in for a former friend of the podcast, Mackenzie Alexander, who. I don't think we need to remind Clemson fans. I was the only one that famously picked him to commit to Clemson on signing day that year, despite our friend Adam Fisher going with Tom Lemming's pick of Auburn in the Naples Daily News, our former employer. So
I was doing.
We all know how that works.
These files that we've been writing this week of top newcomers. I was looking through the list of guys for Iowa State. Guess who's making an appearance at Iowa State next season?
Who?
Our friend McEnroe Alexander.
Wow.
Yeah, transferring in there. I think it was Iowa State. I'm pretty sure. I was begging Paul Clark from Cyclone Report. I was like, let me make McEnroe the top newcomer for Iowa State, just so I could cash in one last time on our Southwest Florida connection there. But we went somewhere else, which you'll have to read the story to find out who we actually picked.
Boy, I got to do some research on McEnroe. I just assumed he was at USF with every other player we covered in high school during our 4-year window at down in Southwest Florida when Nick and I used to work there. Pretty much every guy went to USF or ended up at USF somehow via transfer. But also real quick, this doesn't apply to anyone who's listening. Ben Kurt, I believe is his name, was the quarterback at up in Cape Coral. People hyped him up when we were down there. He actually was named the starter at Virginia this week. So, boy, the 239 were really stepping up. This week, actually, I started going to games. But believe it or not, Nick, I'm sure you're glad you missed this. I've already been to 14 games this season in a matter of just 2 short weeks. Usually you would be there with me, standing out in the sun and whatnot for 15 to 17 hours of the day.
Must have been like Christmas for you.
Yeah, it was just like Christmas, and I was one of the reindeer pulling the sled all around the world. So we want to talk about the importance of seeing these guys in person. Really, people kind of debate this, especially in live games, because you may go see a guy and he's not playing against anybody else. Both of us happen to be in talent-rich areas where, I went to a game, Roswell against Buford, where, I had 30 Division I prospects on the field. And, of course, IMG's coming to town this weekend. It's a similar situation. We know you're going out to see some games this weekend. Give us a look at who you're going to see, and then what do you think? What do you take from these live games that you may put more emphasis on, even if a guy's not facing maybe top-tier competition?
Well, for me, me personally, in my situation, obviously, just having moved to Texas here in May, I'm still playing, not really catch-up so much, but, there's still a lot of guys that I haven't had the opportunity to see in person, and guys that we've had ranked that had, little to no exposure that we've seen personally, other than what we've been able to tell from their film. So tonight, we're recording this on a Thursday. I'm going to go see Legarian Carson, who's a guy that we've had. I don't know if he ever cracked it into the top 100. Right now, he's still a top 150 player in our rankings, and he's been committed to Texas for some time. And just a huge, strong defensive end from what we can tell. But there's a difference to seeing a kid in person and in pads. And, just seeing the level of dominance that he displays on a football field. Because, when you go to these camp atmospheres, sometimes the motivations level changes from player to player, and what's going on in the one-on-one reps, and just the atmosphere of the kids around him and the coaches and things like that. In a football game, it's very clear, like things are on the line for these kids, because, they take, even though the kids that we cover are all have high Division I aspirations and have been recruited nationally in some cases, or they're still very, very motivated to win football games at the high school level. And it's a different sort of mentality for these kids coming in on in this case, a Thursday night, then we'll see on like a Saturday afternoon after they've been in position drills for 4 hours before we get into the one-on-one things, So I'm very excited to see Legarian in person, because you just get a different feel for a kid when you see him in the cleats, pads, and helmet. It's an entirely different perception of what you see from a kid as a football player than once you see him in just in compression shorts and in a shirt or whatever. So so I'm excited to see him. There's some other guys that I'm seeing this weekend. Jalen Rager is a guy that's really been tearing things up this summer as a highly ranked wide receiver. He's been committed to Oklahoma, so I'm going to go see him on Friday night. I have yet to see him in person. He's been to a couple of camps, but none that we've been able to attend. Had a pretty strong showing at the opening. And then on Saturday afternoon, among other games, I might go see a few more, but on Saturday, I'm the headliner for me as of right now is to go see Damian Miller, who's a receiver committed to Texas. And some of these guys, we've seen at camps or other events, but it's been, in some cases more than a year since we've had a chance to check in with them and see them in person. So, for me, it's extra valuable. We only have 2 more ranking cycles left. One of them comes at the end of this season. And these early games are important for you, seeing 14 of them before kids start picking up injuries or something. At least you get a chance to see them play in pads and play in a game atmosphere.
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to all these games, and I was, figuring generally this weekend, the second weekend of the season up here in Georgia, is when the teams from Florida come up, and we get the old border war over at that stadium with the horrible lighting in DeKalb County, which is where I live. Halliford Stadium. Anyway, that's not happening this year, and I really was scraping to find a game to go to on Friday night. I mean, not a lot of good matchups. Surprisingly, the best game appears to be on Saturday with Grayson against IMG, and I really don't want to go to that game because it's on TV and I can watch it on TV anyway. But in person, I do put stock in it. I think it serves a purpose. Some of the other guys that do our job are like, oh, it doesn't do me any good. But no matter what game I go to, there's several Division I or FCS players on the field. It's like, I'm not going to see a guy. There's only a few players that maybe are from remote areas of Georgia where you might go see a game, and they're the only guy who's going to play college football on the field. And I think the same can be said for Texas. So I'm in favor of keeping us out watching these games. I do want to. Obviously, I'm enjoying spending time at home, so I'm trying to stay local. But I definitely think they do serve a purpose in the recruiting world. So that about wraps up our recruiting talk for the week. But Nick, we got to hear about Rio. How was it? You got one memorable story or something that really stuck out to you from your time down there?
There was a lot made about the conditions out there, a lot of concerns about the stability of the venues and the security and stuff. I mean, it's really crazy to be in a place where, when you go to, this is the second Olympics that I've been to, and both times, everything is behind fences and steel cages. It seems like they really try to control pedestrian and traffic flow as much as they can. Rio is a very cool place. It's a very diverse place and interesting to see in person. Like, I would definitely go back to Rio on a vacation for like a week, but spending 3 weeks there is a completely different story. And when you're there for the Olympics, it's really crazy to see all the soldiers with the automatic rifles and the military trucks and stuff, on standby at their posts. I guess that makes you feel better, but at the same time, like, you have to remember that they're there for a reason too. So, the Olympics is a real unique experience too, especially when you're in a country that, was at best apathetic towards them in a lot of cases. Obviously a lot of people didn't want them there to begin with. And, talking about the problems that it created in Rio is a whole different podcast for a different subject matter. But, I guess the one thing that I remember most is when it would rain, the water level would rise, and all the stagnant water that is carrying like all the sewage and refuse that they just pour into the public water system over there in Brazil really comes to the top of the surface. And there is no place, there's no place that's safe from that aroma, when the rain comes through. But generally, though, I mean, the weather was beautiful. The mosquitoes weren't as bad as everybody was thinking they were going to be. Security wasn't an issue for me. Just transportation and the smell of the place was really, something you had to deal with. But other than that, I had a good time. Other than the fact that it was a lot of work and no no transitionary period before I have to come back home and jump right into football season here.
Boy, geez, yeah. I did watch a special on Rio on Real Sports on HBO, and boy, yeah, there was it was that sewage situation, which was supposed to be cleaned up before the Olympics got there, just unfortunately never happened. So yeah, that was definitely not an attractive sight, I can imagine. But we're glad to have you back. Now it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Rants and Recommendations. We're back, better than ever.
Yes. Yes.
Did you? Hopefully, we'll try not to recommend the same thing 2 weeks in a row, which Rob Cassidy had no problem doing with Stranger Things. The week that's how we can make fun of him this week, because we know he's not going to listen to the show. So no problem there. First, I guess, do you want me to start? You got something? I'm sure you got plenty of complaints queued up.
Well, no, I don't know, man. I've been living in a bubble for the past couple of weeks. Why don't you get me warmed up here, and we'll see if I can piggyback.
Well, first I'll start with a recommendation. I don't know if I've recommended this on the show before. Right after I made fun of Rob, I've been catching up with the show Review, which I know I've recommended to you personally. I've been watching season 2 on Hulu. It's a show where it's a comedy type show where this guy has a fake TV show, or it's a scripted show, and he reviews life experiences, and it just gets more and more ridiculous. It's actually kind of a serialized show where the bad decision he makes in one episode spills over further and further. It just has Andrew Daly as a star. You probably are thinking, who's Andrew Daly? When you see him, you'll know who it is. And it's a very funny show. I really enjoy it. I'm about done, like I said, about done with season 2, and I think season 3 will probably be on TV here sometime soon. Now, you give us a recommendation, then I'll find something to complain about, I guess.
Okay. Well, I will say this. One of the first things that I did when I came home is re-up my NFL Field Pass subscription, which again, I also know that I've recommended to you. First of all, I'm a huge proponent of online streaming sports subscriptions, because the baseball one is good, the Major League Soccer one is good. For anybody that plays fantasy football, as we know that it's getting real close to all those fantasy drafts and things of that nature for people, it's a great tool because you get to pretend like you're a joker like me and Woody that goes back and watches the film, because not only do you get to watch the broadcast versions of games DVR'd, you also get the coach's film perspective, where they show you 2 shots of every single play, minus the commentary, minus all the frills and production stuff. You just get to watch the film yourself, watch your favorite players. It's really a good tool for people that like to play fantasy, especially that want to zero in on guys that they think might be trying to pick up or anything like that on the waiver wire. And you can watch all that stuff. The only catch is you have to watch that stuff after the games are played. So whereas the NFL Direct Ticket, you watch it live and you pay twice as much, whatever the case is. I opt to go for the Field Pass because we're usually so busy and I can't watch games live anyway.
Yeah, we know you like the old All-22. Speaking of which, are we going to do the Rivals Fantasy League? I think you're the commish there. Are you going to get it fired back up?
You know, boy, you want to talk about a rant portion? We could rant about the Rivals Fantasy Football League ad nauseum here every podcast if we wanted to. I don't know. We're gonna have to take a look at that. I know Adam Gorney has all kinds of innovative ideas for side bets and money transferring situations. Oh, maybe I'm not supposed to say that we do that.
No. We're not doing any innovations. If we're going to play the league, it's going to be a fantasy league.
Well, here's my rant. By
the way,
I appreciate going. I know what you're going to say here, but let me just get this out.
I won last week. That's it.
Okay, all right, great job. You're fantastic. I won the first year that we did it. I'm not going to say anything about that, but anyway, so Gorney goes. Gorney has all kinds of ideas for side bets and different things that we can do to improve the league. But here's the deal: none of our coworkers want to do any trades. There's still only ever been one trade in 2 years, the past 2 years that we've done the fantasy league, and it was between me and Derek Sampson. The only trade. So we gotta, if we're gonna get into this, we gotta zap some life back into the process. I feel like.
Well, I don't have whatever. I'm the king of the waiver wire. I don't need to. I actually have tried to trade several times. I think there's a few issues with any fantasy football platform. With the way they notify you of potential trades. I think, a lot of that stuff gets lost in the shuffle and you end up missing out on stuff. So anyway, I'd like to play fantasy football. That's the only league I'm in, is I famously sold my franchise in another league I'd been in for a long time to some guy who really wanted to get in. I made him buy my spot in the league from me, which was quite a move, quite a move on my part. Big shout to Paco, who was the guy who bought me out of the league. My complaint,
way to step up, Paco.
Yeah, my complaint has to do with high school football, believe it or not, Nick. And I know you've heard me complain about this in real life. There's way too many people on the sidelines at these games, man.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It is.
I should have thought about this.
It's out of control. I mean, it's to the point now where you're at a game and it's shoulder to shoulder, basically, all 120 yards of the field, from end zone, end of the end zone, end of the end zone. You've got all kinds of parents down there taking photos, team photographers, which, hey, guess what? That's fine. But then we've got, 9 little kids being ball boys. We've got families. I mean, I was on the field at a game last Friday, and there was a girl who couldn't have been older than 5 who's standing 4 yards out of bounds with her back to the field looking at her phone. And I'm just wondering, something really bad's going to happen to somebody who's looking at their phone, not paying attention on the sideline, and they're going to get hit and run over, and it's going to be a serious injury. There's way too many people at these games, JV players, little kids from the middle school, whoever. We've got to clean it up because I think an accident's coming your way, and not to mention for your purposes and recently mine, we're trying to shoot videos, take photos, stuff like that, and people are jumping in the way, we're missing stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, the number of times that I've panned right to follow a long touchdown run only to have the shot ruined at the moment of truth by, 4 jabronis that used to play there 10 years ago, leaning in onto the field. Really, really frustrating. Fortunately, in Texas, the stadiums are a much more luxurious situation than a lot of the ones that you go to in podunk, small towns outside of Atlanta. Here, every stadium is at minimum a $20 million investment with security staffs and luxury boxes. So I'm looking forward to my field access there.
That's even more of a problem for me because we all know I have a hell of a time getting into games wherever I go.
Right, yeah.
With any type of security guard at any place in all of America wants to stop me and ask what I'm doing there and why I'm there and wait a minute, we didn't know anything about media. What media? Media still has to pay. I mean, the amount of incidents that happens. Of course, everyone will say, "Hey, Woody, that's a you problem. That's not a them problem." But
Yeah. Well, if you tried to look halfway professional before you showed up to a place,
Yeah, maybe I should walk around with chew in my mouth like some of the other recruiting analysts who covers. You guys ever heard of a tobacco-free zone? I mean, it says it right there on the sign, yet half the coaches and half the media have a dip in spitting tobacco on the field where people are going to be rolling around, Anyway, that's a whole nother rant for another day. So that wraps it up. Big shout to M. Deuce, who, by the way, produced both of the songs we used in commitment videos this past week. You can find him on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/M-Deuce. And you can find me and Nick on Twitter, at RivalsWoody, at RivalsCrookCity. And we'll be back with another episode next week, hopefully with Rob Cassidy back in the mix with us as well.